as a child psychiatrist, the number one question that I get asked, and it's through people finding me on Facebook, it's my neighbors, it's when I go to church, it's anywhere that I go, people say, and they're earnest, why are we having so much anxiety and depression? Why are the youth struggling? There's no shortage of articles or newspapers or news outlets that are reporting that we are seeing some increases in anxiety and depression and in youth suicide. Some of those people are very earnest, and they're looking at me waiting for an answer. Many of them already have a theory of some kind. And you probably can guess, the most common theory is cell phones and social media. They kind of think that this has to be the problem, that the youth have cell phones and it's destroying their brains, and we don't understand it, but it seems really scary. And they're trying to, I guess, get validation or have me agree with them. People have other excuses. People will talk about our school system. I'm probably forgetting others. People will talk about pressures from church organizations or political pressures, or, like I said, things in the environment or environmental toxins, the way that we raise kids these days, and parents take a lot of blame. The purpose of this presentation today is for me to take a stab at what I think is the problem and how I think we ought to be talking about mental health. And I'll tell you, it's not the way that we traditionally talk about it. Okay, it turns out there's a new, I like saying this, there's a new but not so new way to think about mental illness. How many have heard of Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs? It's been around forever, right? Everybody's raising their hand. This is something that's on a poster in the back of a classroom somewhere, and you sort of look at it, you talk about it for a minute, you think, that's really wonderful. It adds maybe to the aesthetic of the psychology classroom, and then we move on. And now I'm 10 years into being a psychiatrist, and I use that increasingly in my own clinical practice. It's this little gem. When you see the most complicated cases, the most difficult situations, and believe me, I see difficult situations, I go back to Maslow. So Maslow had this great thought. He said, sometimes we focus so much on behavior and how that we motivate behavior. It appears to me that people are motivated. People want to be good. People want to, what he said, self-actualize, if only we create the right kind of environment for them to do that in. And so we talk about these rings, Maslow's hierarchy, that most fundamentally what people need is their physical needs to be met. That if you are tired or sleep deprived or not eating well or homeless, it's pretty hard to think about other areas in your life where you're working on competency or how you're feeling good, or your relationships, right? After that, safety. And I think this is where people lose Maslow, because they think, well, we live in a really safe society, and it's a first world country, and our kids are safe. In fact, we go to sometimes amazing lengths to keep them safe, to protect these children. And yet we are talking about psychological and emotional safety, which is very different. You can say, my kids are safe, and you ask them, how are you feeling? And they're freaking out. How do your children feel safe? And it's things like safe to feel, that emotions are okay, that we don't say, oh, you're feeling sad, we need to fix that. You're feeling anxious, how do we fix that? You say, that's okay. Those look like some really big emotions. Safe to feel, safe to think. When our kids are trying to kind of think out loud and they're talking about their thoughts and their perspectives, do we interrupt? Do we cut them off? Do we finish their thoughts for them? Or do we, like some psychologists say, put that duct tape over your mouth and let them think and let them talk while you just listen? It's really hard for parents to do, actually. It means safe to explore, to try new things, safe to fail when you're trying new things. Do our kids feel safe to fail? Do they feel like if they get a really bad grade or really mess up on something that their life will go on? Often not. They're really catastrophic about things. Do they feel safe to be seen? And a part of that is being vulnerable enough to allow people to see them. One way I like to ask about that is I say, how well do people know you? Who knows you better than anyone else? And often they'll say, a name, and I'll say, okay, like on a scale of 0 to 100, how well do they know you? And if a kid can only identify someone who they say, oh, like 40, 50, like they kind of know me, I guess, that's really worrisome to me. I'm wondering if it's safe to be seen, or if people are really allowing them to be vulnerable and open with their feelings. It's emotional and psychological safety that we're going for. And it's that kind of safety that then pushes people up into being more concerned about connection. Connection is a word that I love, even though I don't know how to define it well. But you know it when you see it, if I can say that. You know that you're connected in a moment, that you're making eye contact, you're seeing one another. It's like a shared, maybe a laugh or a smile or a shared experience. Often we go to great lengths as families to go on great, vacations, and you know the stereotype where we go to Disneyland and everybody's happy except dad's miserable the whole time and they're fighting on the way home, and it didn't feel like a very connecting experience. And yet it can take 30 seconds at the end of your day or after dinner or on the couch with your children to feel a connection. And there's different ways to connect. We talk about connecting with playfulness, with humor. The play therapists are fond of saying things like, you should never talk in a normal voice when you can talk in a silly voice. And you should never walk when you could skip. And you should never stand when you can fall down. Because silliness gets you a lot of connection with kids, even teenagers. Do you know teenagers walk around most of their day worrying that they're the dumb person in the room, that they're the silly one? And if you as an adult will just embrace that role, even though they will roll their eyes at you, there's a little part inside of them that's thinking, oh, at least it's not me, it's them. And it makes them feel a little comfortable. So don't be afraid to lose your dignity to find your child, as they say. A little bit of playfulness, look for opportunities to connect. And if you're struggling with connection, if you're having a hard time, connecting, sometimes the best thing you can say is that. I want to connect with you, but I'm struggling. Parents want to know what to say. Sometimes you just say, I don't know what to say. Some kids are pretty prickly. I think it'd be funny if parents, tried on their teenagers' shirts or pants when they came home from school one day and they were walking around the house in their clothes saying, well, I just wanted to feel a little closer to you today. So I was just wearing your clothes. Or maybe when you're done chewing that gum, I could have it and chew it for a little while so we feel a little closer. You can play around with ways to connect, but you have to insist on it. Don't give up. And you know it when you see it. And then confidence. And then we get to that rung that everybody's most interested in, which is confidence or competence, right? We want our kids to feel good about doing things, but we also want them to be good at doing things. And boy, we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we do this, and are you doing this, and how are your grades, and how are you doing in sports, and are you practicing? Have you learned how to clean your room and to do all these things? And that's important. But the best way to build confidence or competence is to care for these other basic needs. And then as you get up to that higher level and you're thinking about how do I really build confidence after I've made it safe and I've connected, it's often like just expressing confidence. It's often like just saying, you got this. You're great. Give yourself a break. Be patient. Boy, teenagers love hearing that. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that can play out. But all of these things that we think that we're doing and teaching our children, it's like we give them the 1,000th lecture on the same topic, and we think we're helping them be more competent and make better decisions. And by the time our kids are 12 or 13, they're rolling their eyes because they already know everything that you think and feel and believe. And you're just telling it to them again. And so often, just sometimes I give this roller coaster analogy, like you're sitting next to them thinking, we're in this together. I don't know how to solve this problem. You sure got a lot of stuff ahead of you, but let's do it. Let's do it. And let's not, as parents who have more life experience, let our anxiety become theirs. We know that sometimes life doesn't go like we planned when we were in high school, right? Did anybody's life go like you planned when you were in high school? And yet we look at these kids in high school and say, what's your plan? You got to have a plan. We could be a little more patient with them. So this is Maslow's hierarchy. And the idea is that we will self-actualize, that if people get to this point, if we're working on caring for these needs, they will thrive, okay? So the way that we think about this at the United Way is that this is a lens. This is not a program. It's not a special way of like going home and doing some kind of new behavioral strategy. It's a lens. It's a way of seeing the world and seeing other people and thinking about even big problems like depression and anxiety and looking through this lens so we don't look at people and immediately try to fix things. It's up to us. That's the big implication. So often I go to these different meetings and sit on different committees and they say, we're really worried about kids in our community. How do we teach kids resilience skills? And I go, I kind of freak out inside. I don't do this in the meeting, but I'll do it now because none of you guys are there in the meeting. But I sort of freak out inside and I'm like, resiliency is not a skill. You don't just teach somebody to pick themselves up from wherever they're at and figure out how to move on. We need to step in and care for their needs. And when you care for their needs, physical needs, safety, connection, confidence, when you look closely at those layers on Maslow's hierarchy, you can line those up almost literally with the resiliency research that's coming out about the need for connections, about making them feel like there's this internal locus of control, that they have power over their life, about the need to help them feel safe. So this is not something we go around to all the elementary schools and I can just teach, or the United Way can teach and say, okay, kids, you need to feel safe, connected, and confident. Go do it. This is on us. This is on communities, doctors, parents, our natural caring systems, and that's why we're doing this. Okay, so those are the implications, and this is your lens. And so I want to talk about motivation for just a minute. Remember that motivation is a want that requires a skill, which is an ability, to be fulfilled, to have an outcome. Self-motivation is a skill. That's not what people don't understand. That they come in and they say people are not motivated, as if we're talking about a character flaw. Like, well, I just got a lazy one. That's my kid just came out that way. And we don't appreciate that when you have to do something that you don't want to do, maybe like sitting in a meeting or spending an afternoon listening to a talk, you have to say to yourself, okay, this is important. I really want to do this. We have all of what we call our executive functions, that part of our brain that helps self-motivate. If I have to do dishes or something at the end of the day and I don't want to do it, and I'm just tired, and I say to my wife, I don't really want to do this, would it be fair for her to say, you're so unmotivated, you're lazy, right? There could be a lot of reasons that just make it hard in that moment, and I have to do this work of self-motivating, remembering when I've done it before, and how long is this going to take me, and let me see how I can organize this into small tasks, and I'll try to make it fun for myself by listening to some music or by maybe giving myself a treat, and then I'll give myself a little pep talk, and then I'll remember to do this when I'm done. That's an adult grown-up skill. So if your kids don't seem motivated, ask yourself, what's going on? You can look at needs, and in that needs pyramid is a confidence or a competence level where maybe at some point you do have to sit with them and say, how do we help you learn how to self-motivate? How do we help you learn how to do things that are hard? But if you're just sitting back, doling out rewards and consequences until they can figure out how to do things, you're going to be frustrated. I want to talk about Kobe, if that's okay, because I think this hits on some important points. Kobe's 18. He's somewhat estranged from his family. He does live at home. He tells you that he feels isolated, that he lacks meaning in his life, and actually goes on to tell you that he's having suicidal thoughts. Okay? So estranged from his family, isolated, meaningless, suicidal thoughts. And then through his tears, he even says, and I have this, what he calls a porn addiction. And he just feels terrible. How do you approach Kobe? Do you know what a lot of people do when they're told that someone has suicidal thoughts? Either physically or in their mind, they kind of start backing up like, stay right there. I think there's a protocol for this. We need to go get help. We need to figure this out. The ambulance comes at some point. That kid will never open up to you again. You have to think, starting at the bottom, hey, Kobe, when have you slept last? How's that going? Why don't we both have a snack while we talk a little bit more? Thanks for telling me. You make it safe to talk by putting duct tape over your mouth if you have to. Again, that duct tape is one of our best parenting strategies. Put it over your mouth And you will be freaking out inside if you love this kid. But just say, tell me more. How long have you been having suicidal thoughts? How intense are they? How often do you have them? What have you thought about doing? Thank you for telling me. Safety, emotional safety, connection. I can see how hard you're trying. Just so you know, everything that you've told me brings us, I think, closer together. Do you feel that? I don't feel more distant from you, I feel closer. I want to help. But then you don't fix it, right? What do you think we should do? That's how you build confidence. What ideas do you have? It's so tempting to fix. Have you ever known somebody that's really depressed? I mean, like really depressed, like a close family member? Our reflex is to fix. But in my experience, if somebody's depressed, the two most common thoughts they have are, one, I'm broken in some way, or two, I'm a burden on people around me. And if they're thinking those things and you jump in and say, let me fix you, you have just reinforced that they are broken and that you're the one that has to apparently fix them. Do not jump in. It's not something you need to fix. It's something, and remember that safe to feel? This is okay. This is okay. It's okay to be depressed. It's okay to not feel okay. I don't need to take that away from you. I don't need to rob depression. My patients are kind of surprised when we've been working for a while, and I say, just to be clear, I don't see my job as taking your feelings away. The medicines we're using, the therapy we're doing, I'm not trying to take your depression, your anxiety, your pain away. I'm trying to help you function, live with it, process it, and if you're like most healthy people and we can help you through this, this will become a really important source of passion in your life. You ever met a really passionate person who does really amazing things? Talk to them about why they're so passionate about something. I dare you. And they will tell you a story that's a painful one. It's a painful one. It's pain that builds stuff in our life. We're not trying to protect our kids from pain. We make it safe to feel. We help them feel connected when they're struggling. We promote their confidence. We encourage them to be patient, to give themselves time. And we sit in that journey with them to see where it goes. And so go today to have an experience. Determine to work on connection, to lose your dignity to find your child, to try to connect, to think about connect and then redirect. Yes, there are some things we have to teach our kids, but you will have so much more success if you think safety, connection, confidence. If you yell downstairs at your child and say, get off the video games, it's time to eat, get down here, what's going to happen? Anyone who's a parent, they're not going to come. Eventually, you're going to march upstairs and you're going to unplug the thing and you're going to have a big fight and they're going to be grounded and your dinner's going to be tense. Is this just my home? But if you walk upstairs, trust me, and you sit next to them, you say, what are you playing? How's it going? You're getting really good at this. This looks really awesome. Tell me about this. And you do that for 30 seconds. Connect. And then you say, do you know what? I think we have to go downstairs. I actually came up to, because it's dinner time, could we find a stopping place? And then you redirect. Use that lens of Maslow, and let's see these problems differently. Let's give each other a little more credit, and let's try to really meet these needs for one another. And I actually think it'll be the best way that we make a lot of progress. Thanks so much.